We're all experiencing something very important. And yet, none of us can accurately describe what we're experiencing. Because what we're experiencing is not describable. When we talk to each other, we talk about different parts of our experience, different pieces. The experience itself is beyond the spoken. This place of the experience that is beyond what can be spoken, when we tune in there, that's when we're tuning in to something that's real. Because everything that can be described, it means that it's something, information, that we received through our senses. If we received it through our senses, then it's just an impression. It's not life itself. The one that is alive experienced a sense organ that was transmitting this information, but it's not life itself. We want to tune into the one that was experiencing that sensation, not to the sensation. The one experiencing is real. What he's experiencing is an impression. In order to read these impressions accurately, we want to step back and not be overly attached to these impressions. Otherwise, we won't be able to realize their true nature. We won't be able to realize the effect that the impressions are having on us. So when we think back throughout our life, we're thinking of the impressions that our organs left on our consciousness, on our awareness. But that's not the true nature of the experience. The true nature was, what were your organs doing at the time? What were they feeding into your blood? And how is that affecting how you feel? That's the reality of the situation. So it's not what we saw or what we heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. It's how did our organs interpret that moment, and what did they cause us to feel, to become, to experience. What our organs are contributing to our experience is undefinable. And so in order to discover that part of the experience, again, we come back to the realization that we're experiencing something that cannot be defined. All the attempts in the world are not going to manage to capture the uncapturable. And so that undefined experience needs to be lived, needs to be manifested, needs to be allowed to create itself in full. The real nature, the real will of the organs needs to be fulfilled, but in a way that creates harmony, in a way where the organs don't come into conflict with each other. And so the story of our lives is not what happened outside of us, it's what happened inside of us. What happened to our organs while we were experiencing life. That's the story of our life. That creates our experience. The way we're going to respond to the present depends on how we programmed our organs in the past. What kind of pain or pleasure did our organs experience, and what was the effect? What was the result? What did it conclude because of our experience? That conclusion becomes a permanent part of our conversation of what's going to happen within our lives. Unless we somehow return that organ to its original state. So everything definable is flowing from the undefinable on every level. Whether it's a physical level, where we keep going into smaller and smaller parts, the more we can see, and yet we can't find the end. Or, of course, the spiritual level that has no end. Or any dimension. The nature of the Infinite One is to create dimensions that have no ends. He demonstrates His power in the vastness and in the minuteness, in how complex things can be and how simple they are at the same time. How big they are, endless, and how every tiny unit is exactly in its place, perfect detail. It's quite a demonstration. And it's never wrong. We have calculations, and we try to go against someone, something that's never wrong. And so all our calculations come after definitions. The undefinable doesn't allow for calculations. And so, in the undefinable, we unite with the undefinable one from where we came forth. As we go into definition, we unite with portions, with different flavors, with different dressings of that same life force. But because they are dressings, in the manifested world they have less power. The closer to the king, the more powerful. The king is completely undefinable. Every definition, and we're another layer away from the king. Every layer away from the king, and we're losing power. The life force can no longer express itself in its natural form, in its infinite form, in its undefined form, because it has received definition. Definition is a prison to the infinite. The nature of the soul is infinite potential. Infinite and yet defined. Defined only by the laws of the organs that create its physical manifestation. Those are the limits of the soul. Every organ has its own dimensions that it adds in order to manifest the potential of the soul, in order to give the soul access to its own power. The power it has infinitely in the spiritual realms, but here on earth it needs an organ in order to attain that power. All the powers that we have, vision, sound, these are powers. They give us access to very deep and meaningful experiences. They give us access to information that guides our experience. How different would our experience be without the power of any of these organs? And yet all these organs contain an undefined life force, the same undefined life force. They all manifest a different potential from that same life force. Just like every human being is expressing a different potential of the same life force. And so the organs are the definitions that come forth from the undefinable. The body is the definition that comes forth from the undefinable. The physical world, all the galaxies, are definitions that came forth from the undefinable. The undefinable meaning the capacity of the human intelligence cannot interact with that level of experience, with that level of being. The undefinable for a child is different than the undefinable for an adult. The undefinable in each moment is different than it was the moment before, and yet for everyone, at all times, there is always the undefinable that's giving life to everything that's defined. No one has reached a source of life where they could say that the definable is all that exists. And so the undefinable is always in charge, and this is for everyone. But not everyone is aware. Many choose to believe that they have defined whatever it is that they rely on. But that definition is going to eventually turn out to be false. All definitions are going to turn out to be false. Because what gives life to everything that we can define is something beyond it. And that something beyond can never be defined, not to anyone. And yet it can fully be trusted because we see what it defined and we learn about its greatness, about its wonder. From what's defined, we enter into the greatness of the undefinable. And that greatness is present in everything that has been defined. Everything is His will. Everything is because He made it be. So His greatness, His importance is present in everything that exists, in every cell, in every organ, in every part. And His will is what gives life, what gives energy to every cell. It makes it happen just so. Only this way. No other way was ever conceivable. From when the world was created, this was the way it was going to be. And yet, each moment, the choice is made only in that moment. But the choice was known because everything has a nature. There are rules to every single transaction. And so life is happening as an interaction between so many different details that the human mind cannot conceive its meaning. And yet the meaning is perfectly there for the one who made it happen. And when we grow in intelligence, we get to taste His wisdom. And just a taste is enough to reassure us. So return to this undefinable experience and remember that this is a mystery, that you are a mystery. Don't assume that the mystery has been solved. Just because we've learned how to survive, that doesn't solve the mystery of who we are. This mystery is what keeps us close to the undefinable. It allows us to remember that we get to choose how we dress this mystery, what we make ourselves believe about it. Because every movement, every decision is also an interpretation. Without interpretation, there can be no movement. So we're constantly dressing this mystery in order to interact with it, and yet we want to remember that it remains a mystery. Even though we have to dress it in order to interact with it, it doesn't mean that we know how to dress it. It's just our present attempt, and soon there will be another one. One that's going to be best based on what the Spirit is going to think then, what the Spirit is going to feel then, spontaneously. So that the undefinable can remain undefined.